The sun glinted off the polished chrome of Vanessa Langley's luxury SUV as it rolled smoothly into the bustling city parking lot, a place where valet attendants in crisp uniforms jostled for position to greet newcomers with practiced smiles. The lot was nearly full, the spaces crowded with vehicles ranging from modest sedans to gleaming sports cars. Yet as Vanessa scanned the rows, her gaze immediately fell on the blue and white signs indicating disabled parking spaces. Most were empty, a few occupied, but the ones she eyed appeared perfect, conveniently close to the building entrance, offering a few precious steps she preferred not to take. She smirked and guided her SUV into one of the open spaces, the tires crunching over the freshly painted lines with a deliberate assurance that only someone of her confidence could muster. Vanessa stepped out of the car in her designer heels, the click of each step against the asphalt announcing her arrival. Her outfit was immaculate, a tailored cream blouse tucked into a high-waisted pencil skirt, designer sunglasses perched just so on her nose, and a leather handbag swinging casually from her arm. She paused for a brief moment, surveying her surroundings, her eyes catching the reflection of her vehicle in the glass-fronted building across the lot. There was an undeniable satisfaction in the small act of bending rules to one's advantage, and she allowed herself a private smile. After all, parking in a space reserved for the disabled wasn't about malice, it was about efficiency, about saving a few steps in a day that was already overflowing with obligations. As she adjusted her sunglasses, her phone buzzed insistently in her bag. Designers, event planners, and friends were all demanding her attention, the messages piling up faster than she could respond. She glanced down, momentarily distracted, and then returned to the act at hand, adjusting the sticker she had affixed to her rearview mirror, a fake disabled placard, pristine and convincing, obtained months ago from a friend who swore it had never been used improperly. Vanessa had no physical limitations, she never had. But in a world dictated by schedules and social appearances, convenience sometimes required bending rules, and she had always been adept at bending them with style. The moment she began to walk toward the building, she noticed a subtle shift in the energy around her. A small crowd had gathered near the courthouse entrance, whispers and murmurs following her like a shadow. Vanessa lifted her chin, maintaining her composure, yet she felt the faint prickle of awareness that not everyone was entirely indifferent to her presence. Before she could reach the doors, a uniformed officer stepped into her path, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Ms. Langley," he said, his tone polite but firm, "you're being cited for parking in a disabled space without a valid permit." Vanessa arched a brow, feigning surprise with the kind of practiced elegance she had refined over years of public appearances. "Surely there's some mistake," she replied smoothly, her voice calm and melodic. "There's a spot literally 5 feet away, and it's empty." "I didn't see a problem." The officer shook his head. "The law is clear, ma'am. You'll need to appear before Judge Frank Caprio." Vanessa exhaled with exaggerated weariness, letting her designer bag rest against her hip. "Very well," she said, her voice carrying the faint trace of dramatic disappointment. "But let's be honest, this won't take long. I have a luncheon at noon, and punctuality is crucial." Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was formal but subdued, marble floors reflecting the morning light filtering through tall windows. Vanessa entered, heels clicking purposefully on the polished tiles, drawing the eyes of passers-by. Cameras were strategically placed near the entrance, and the occasional shutter flash captured her movements. She took in the courtroom, noting the arrangement of empty chairs, the elevated bench where Judge Caprio presided, and the gallery of spectators who had come, curious or amused. Vanessa did not waste a moment. The second she stepped into the courtroom proper, she launched into a practiced performance, speaking quickly and emphatically, gesturing with manicured hands. She explained her busy schedule, the importance of her work in charity circles, the demands of her social calendar. She detailed how she had never done anything like this before and stressed the unintentional nature of her actions. Every word was carefully chosen, every gesture calculated to evoke sympathy, to make the law seem a trivial obstacle in the face of her prominence. Judge Caprio observed silently from his bench, listening to the rapid-fire recital with a patience that bordered on theatrical. His fingers tapped lightly against the polished wood as Vanessa elaborated on her sense of urgency, the inconvenience of a few extra steps, the minor oversight that had led her to park in the prohibited space. She leaned forward, her eyes shining with confidence and expectation, convinced that her charm, influence, and eloquence would sway the room in her favor. Then Judge Caprio leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, and in a voice calm but cutting, said, "Ms. Langley, you think this is about convenience, don't you? About saving a few steps? But let me ask you, what is a few steps compared to the dignity of someone who truly needs that space?" The room fell into sudden, tense silence. Vanessa's confident smile faltered, her rehearsed arguments paused mid-thought, as the weight of his words settled over the courtroom, signaling that this case would not be handled like so many others. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard by the calm authority in Judge Caprio's voice. His words were not merely a reprimand, they carried weight, a moral clarity that seemed to slice through the carefully constructed armor of excuses she had rehearsed. The courtroom was silent now, every observer leaning slightly forward, anticipating what would come next. Vanessa, used to commanding attention and bending situations to her favor, suddenly felt a strange, unfamiliar vulnerability. She opened her mouth, but the words she had prepared seemed hollow, inadequate against the truth laid bare by the judge. "You parked in that space thinking no one was watching," Judge Caprio continued, his gaze unwavering. "Perhaps you thought no consequences would follow. But consequences are not about punishment alone, they are about understanding. Understanding that rules exist for a reason, and that the convenience of the few cannot outweigh the rights of the many." Vanessa swallowed, her throat dry. She had never been spoken to like this before, not by friends, not by colleagues, not by anyone who had previously admired or feared her. Her usual charm, her practiced smiles, her carefully modulated voice, all of it seemed suddenly irrelevant. Judge Caprio wasn't asking for apologies, he was demanding reflection. He wasn't interested in her excuses, in the inflated story she had prepared. He wanted her to see, truly see, the impact of her actions. He paused, letting the silence stretch, giving space for the words to sink in. Every person in the courtroom seemed to hold their breath. Vanessa's eyes darted around the room, but all she could see were faces waiting, watching, anticipating her response. She felt a flush of unease, a rare sensation that came from being confronted with one's own shortcomings in public. The luxury she had taken for granted, the privilege she had assumed was unquestioned, now felt fragile and exposed. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, his expression softening but remaining firm. "I could impose a fine, yes. I could let this slide because you are, by many measures, a good person. But I think you need something more, a moment to see the impact of your choices." Vanessa's brows furrowed in confusion. "Your Honor," she began, her voice uncertain for the first time. "I am assigning you a short period outside the courtroom," he said, gesturing toward the bailiff. 15 minutes. You will observe the disabled parking spaces, see who uses them, see the daily challenges faced by those who rely on them. When you return, we will continue." The officer approached her, his tone polite but firm. Vanessa's initial instinct was to protest, to argue that her time was valuable and that this exercise was unnecessary. Yet when she looked into the judge's eyes, the calm certainty there left no room for negotiation. With a resigned nod, she allowed herself to be escorted outside, the click of her heels echoing against the courthouse steps, a rhythm that now felt jarring in contrast to the lesson unfolding. From the vantage point of the parking lot, everything she had previously ignored now came into stark focus. An elderly man with a cane maneuvered toward a space several rows away from the entrance, wincing as he adjusted his weight with each step. A mother guided her child in a wheelchair, scanning the lot carefully, checking each spot, calculating the safest path to the building. Their movements were deliberate, cautious, and measured, not born of choice, but of necessity. Vanessa watched, feeling the weight of their struggle, the frustration in small acts she had once considered inconsequential. Every denied step, every forced detour, every moment of inconvenience was suddenly magnified, vivid and unavoidable. 15 minutes stretched long, an eternity in her mind. She saw people arriving and leaving, each encounter a reminder that privilege was not entitlement, and that convenience taken for granted by one could mean hardship endured by another. The exercise